Don't touch that. Her voice sliced through the music like a knife through silk. Everyone turned. The woman in the crimson dress stood with one heel pointed forward, like she was about to walk straight through him. A champagne flute dangled from her fingertips, tilting dangerously. Her eyes lined with arrogance and eyeliner wear locked on the man standing by the grand piano. He froze. Tall, dark suit, quiet demeanor. His hand was barely hovering over the glossy surface of the Steinway, not even touching it. But her voice made it seem like he'd shattered glass. I said don't touch the piano, she repeated, louder this time. That's a 7-figure instrument, not a toy for anyone to just poke. A few guests chuckled. Someone at the back pulled out their phone, sensing the spectacle. The yacht's main deck was glittering in candlelight and curated exclusivity. Each guest had a name some had headlines, and she, the host's girlfriend, was the reigning queen of the moment. Influencer, model, legacy last name. Red dress, red lipstick, words like knives. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there. Maybe he should have. Maybe he should have stepped back and let it go. But he didn't. The tension didn't come from him. It came from the room. Because nobody recognized him. He wasn't on the invite list. At least, not the one they had seen. No one remembered him arriving. He had just been there. A quiet shadow at the edges of the party, sipping sparkling water, nodding politely. Too polished to be crew, too calm to be a guest, and far too black to be taken seriously on this deck. She stepped closer, her heels clicking like gunshots on the polished wood. You're with someone, right? Whose assistant are you? His gaze met hers, calm, almost indifferent. But behind his eyes, something shifted. She scoffed. Whatever, just please, move away from the piano. Her voice curled around the words like they were perfumed, delicate, but they landed like ash. He looked down at the keys. They gleamed beneath the golden lights, perfectly tuned, perfectly guarded. He hadn't touched a piano in years. Not since his mother died. Not since everything changed. She watched him like a hawk. So did everyone else. And then it did something no one expected. He reached out and laid one finger gently on middle C. Just one note. Just one sound. Soft, pure, hanging in the air like smoke that refused to disappear. Every head turned, every breath caught, and for the first time that night no one laughed. But that wasn't even the worst part. For a moment, the sound just hung there on soft note drifting across the hush like mist over still water. Then silence. She blinked slowly, like trying to register whether he'd actually done it. You're joking, she muttered. Did he really? Her words broke the trance, and a ripple of uneasy laughter spread across the room like someone had dropped a pebble. In a lake of tension, a few guests smiled awkwardly. Some whispered. One man by the bar murmured, well, that's bold. But the woman in red didn't laugh. She stared, because he hadn't just touched the piano. He had made it speak, and he hadn't stopped. His fingers moved slow at first, like testing something half-remembered, then smoother, richer, deeper. The notes fell one by one, deliberate and clean. A melody began to form, not loud, not showy, but precise, intimate, like the sound of memory being unwrapped. Her eyes narrowed. He's faking it, she whispered, almost to herself. Has to be. That chest's probably just copying something. But someone nearby shook their head. No, that's not just playing. He's building something. She turned. Excuse me. The man shrugged, eyes still fixed on the pianist. That's not some TikTok trick. That's control. Field structure. Another guest, a woman in a silk jumpsuit, nodded. He's classically trained. You can hear it in the sustain. More people were turning now. Conversations faded. Even the waitstaff paused mid-step. Trays hovering in midair. The music filled the yacht not aggressively, but like gravity. Like it had always been meant to echo through the polished wood and glass and gold. He didn't look up, didn't glance at the growing crowd, or the phones pointed his way, or the girl in red now frozen beside the champagne tower. He just played, and in the curve of his back, the precision of his hands, there was something unmistakable, A man who wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was remembering something, and the music was remembering with him. One woman near the railing slowly lowered her phone. "Why does this feel sad?" she whispered. Another guest said nothing, just shook his head slowly, eyes glistening. The girlfriend of the yacht owner, the loudest voice in the room, stood completely still. Her fingers tightened around her glass. The stem creaked faintly. She was watching not just a man play piano. She was watching the room slip away from her. Every note he played rewrote the moment, erased the insult, re-centered the spotlight. Not on her, not on the host, but on a stranger she had tried to belittle. And she didn't even know his name. Still, he hadn't said a word. Not yet. And that silence. That was the most terrifying part. Because something about the way he played, something about the stillness in his face, the restraint, the command made everyone realize this man wasn't showing off. He was deciding something. And what came next might change everything. He stopped playing. No flourish, no bow. Just lifted his hands off the keys, calmly, like setting down the past. And still not a word. The music had said what it needed to say. But now the silence was louder. He stood up, slowly. His chair barely creaked. She took a small step back without realizing it. The crowd wasn't clapping. They didn't dare. This wasn't a performance. It had felt more like witnessing something sacred, private, a memory translated into melody. And now, everyone was trying to figure out what they'd just seen. Someone whispered, "Does anyone know his name?" No answer. The girl in red finally blinked, like coming out of a trance. Her voice returned, but softer, less sharp. To "Didn't know you could, I mean." He turned toward her, not cold, not angry, just still, unshakable. She tried again. "I thought you were with someone. I didn't realize you were." She didn't finish, and he didn't help her. Because there are some moments that aren't meant to be rescued. She looked away, face flushed. The confidence that once laced every syllable had slipped. She didn't know where to put her hands, her glass, her eyes. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk, just nodded once, almost like saying, "You've said enough." Then he stepped away from the piano and walked past her. She didn't stop him. No one did. People parted for him subconsciously. Respectful, like the sea moving aside without being asked. He walked toward the upper deck, and as he disappeared up the steps, the crowd began to stir. Quiet murmurs, questions. Someone finally asked the yacht's host. Who was that? The host, a man known for having everything under control, looked stunned. His girlfriend, though pale, silent, just shook her head, lips parted, no words left. Upstairs, the man reached the top deck. The ocean wind met him like an old friend. He leaned on the rail. Below, the party tried to resume, but it didn't feel like the same event anymore. Because something had shifted. One man had reminded them that status isn't always worn. It isn't loud. It doesn't ask permission. It plays one note and everyone listens. If you've made it this far, thanks for staying with the story. If stories like this move you quickly, unexpected like concert subscribing. Sometimes, the most powerful people in the room are the ones no one notices until it's too late. The wind at the top deck was cool, sharper now. Sea air carried salt and silence. He closed his eyes. The party noise below had dulled into murmurs, like a conversation in another world. He could still feel the keys under his fingers, shows of notes vibrating in his bones. For a long time, he had avoided pianos, even looking at them hurt. Not because he couldn't play, because when he did, he remembered everything. He remembered her hands, his mother skillfully guiding his little fingers over the chipped ivory keys. In their small apartment in Detroit, no heater in the winter, no cable. But they had music. She had taught music at a community center, played at church every Sunday. She used to say, "Baby, play like someone's listening, even if no one is." And he did, until the day the music stopped. Cancer didn't knock. It took her voice first, then her strength, then the piano. Soul piece by piece to cover bills that never stopped coming. He had been 15. He hadn't touched a key since. Not until tonight. Not until that girl red dress, perfect smile, perfect ignorance mimicked something she couldn't understand. She hadn't insulted a hobby. She had insulted his grief. And for the first time in decades, he hadn't swallowed it. He had let the note speak for him. He opened his eyes. The horizon was burning gold now. Sunset folding into the sea. Footsteps behind him. He didn't turn. She didn't speak right away. The girl in red, no longer radiant, no longer towering, stood a few paces away, holding nothing. Hands empty. I didn't know, she said quietly. He said nothing. I didn't mean to, she hesitated. I thought you were just... He finally turned, slowly. Just what? She swallowed. I don't know. Not someone like that. Not someone who... She stopped again. Because she didn't have the words. Because sometimes the truth is too loud to compete with. He nodded once, not in forgiveness, just in understanding. You ever lose something? He said, voice low, calm, so deep it echoes when you breathe. She didn't answer. He didn't expect her to. He looked back at the ocean. I don't need you to be sorry, he said. I just needed you to hear it. And that was the most terrifying thing she'd ever felt. Because it wasn't anger, or pride, or a demand. It was clarity. And the clarity cut deeper than any insult ever could. Let me take you back to the moment he stopped playing. Because something happened in that room, something none of them saw coming. Downstairs, the silence had begun to unravel. Like a thread tugged from the edge of a tightly woven fabric. It started with one man, mid-40s, sharp suit, Wall Street posture. He leaned toward his friend. Brow furrowed. Wait, that piece. I've heard that before. His friend nodded slowly. I thought so too. That second movement, those suspensions. That's not random. That's structured. Another guest, a woman in navy velvet, was already searching her phone. This sounds like the composition from the World Peace Gala Africa Unity fundraiser 2 years ago. The murmurs turned into rustling. More phones appeared, search bars filled. Fingers tapped furiously. And then someone whispered the name. Not loudly, just enough. E. Langston Black. A breath passed through the room like wind through tall grass. The host standing beside his now visibly shaken girlfriend blinked. What? The woman with the phone turned the screen toward them. A video clip loaded slowly over weak signal. The same melody, same phrasing, same weight. Caption: Original composition by E. Langston Black, exclusive performance at UN Cultural Summit. And in the blurry footage there he was. Same hands, same stillness, same silence after the final note. The girlfriend's mouth parted, but no words came. Because it wasn't just any name. Langston Black wasn't some underground pianist. He was a ghost in the music world, known only by whispers, rare appearances, anonymous donations to symphonies and urban art schools. A man who never gave interviews, who never posted, who never stayed. And now, he had just pledged an entity in her boyfriend's yacht. She felt her knees weaken. The floor beneath her didn't feel stable anymore. The host exhaled sharply. Jesus, we was on the deck this whole time. Another voice, younger, piped up near the back. Wait, I thought Langston Black was older. Someone else replied, no one really knows. No photos, no press, just the initials, ELB. A final voice measured, quiet cut through them all. What if that isn't just the pianist? The crowd turned. A woman with salt gray hair, elegant posture, and a face that had seen decades of power whispered. What if that's the Langston Black from Black Equity Holdings? Gasps. Now the air was splitting. To Langston Blacks, or one man who'd built an empire and a legend. The idea felt too large to process, but it fit too perfectly. The silence, the watch no one recognized, the way people instinctively moved aside for him. Even before they knew, he didn't demand presence. He carried it. The girlfriend looked down at her hands. She hadn't even realized she'd been gripping her bracelet so tight it left marks. She whispered, mostly to herself, "What have I done?" But no one was looking at her anymore. They were all staring up the staircase at the empty doorway where he had stood. And someone said, very quietly, almost reverently. We were laughing at a king, and yet none of them knew why he'd really played that song. Because that story started years ago, on a rainy night with a promise he hadn't broken. She stood very still. The laughter had stopped long ago. The murmurs had quieted. Now there was only weight, a silence that pressed against her like windless air, too thick to breathe. Everyone knew who he was now, and somehow that made the moment worse. Because what she remembered wasn't just the note he played, it was the way he looked at her before playing it. Not with anger, not even disappointment, just absence, as if she didn't matter enough to be angry at. She had built a life around being noticed. Her world spun on validation, invites, likes, camera flashes, whispers of envy. But in that single look she had disappeared. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure who she was without attention. She clutched her necklace without realizing it. Her pulse ticked under her fingertips. Beside her, the yacht owner, her boyfriend, was trying to salvage the party, clinking glasses, saying polite things, smiling through confusion. But no one was really listening. They were all still haunted by the music. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also humbling. Because it reminded them that power doesn't always enter the room with an entourage. Sometimes it sits in the corner, silent, waiting. And when it rises, it doesn't ask permission. It simply plays. She swallowed hard. Her thoughts darted between what she had said, what others had recorded, and what the headlines might read tomorrow. She could already hear it. Influencer mocks mysterious billionaire on private yacht. Music world stuns as Langston Black reappears, unannounced. Her name would be in the comments, the captions, the jokes, and worse, the silence of her own regret. Because beyond the embarrassment, beyond the exposure, had missed something else entirely. She hadn't just humiliated a stranger. She had failed to recognize greatness. And now, she would never be part of it, not even on the edges. He had left nothing behind, not a card, not a message, just a moment. But that moment had rearranged the entire evening, maybe even her. She didn't know what stung more, the mistake or the reminder, that she had built her identity on recognizing value, and tonight she had proven herself blind. But upstairs he hadn't thought about her once. Not anymore. Because as the last colors of sunset bled into night and the ocean pulled the day away, he was already somewhere else entirely, somewhere only music could reach. The next morning, he stood in front of a building most people forgot existed. Detroit East Side. It wasn't on any travel list. No one came here to take selfies. No influencers leaned against its cracked brick walls for aesthetic shots. The door was still warped from the cold. Paint flaked off like memory. But this had once been his cathedral. He stepped closer. The old community center. The place where a boy learned that sound could be sanctuary, that music could keep the cold out, if you played it hard enough. He didn't knock. The building was closed, condemned. But he walked around the side, through the rusted gate, to the back, where the windows were lower, where he and his mother used to slip in before rehearsals, when the center couldn't afford to keep the lights on. He stared through the cracked glass. Inside, nothing but dust, collapsed chairs, and silence. But his mind filled in the gaps. There, in the corner, had been the upright piano, stained brown, always out of tune, always warm. There, by the door, she used to stand, clapping for kids who missed half their notes but tried with full hearts. And there, right in the center, had played for her on her birthday. He was 11, the keys stuck. His left hand trembled, but she cried anyway. That's not how the music's written, he'd said, ashamed. She laughed through tears. Then maybe the music needs to change. That was the last year he ever played for joy. Before the illness, before the bills, before the world reminded them that talent doesn't always outrun poverty. He rested a hand on the window pane. Cold, solid. He whispered, I didn't forget. Not about her. Not about this. He had just muted it. Muted everything. For decades, he had built his empire in silence. No headlines, no selfies, no logos, just results. Just respect, but never applause. And then a red dress, a yacht, a moment. And it came back, not because she mocked him. That wasn't new. But because she did it in front of a piano. And he knew if he stayed silent again, he wouldn't just lose the moment. He'd lose what was left of her, the promise. If the world takes the music from you, don't let it. He had let it, but only once. Never again. He turned from the window. The morning was cold, but his chest felt warm, not proud, not triumphant, just clear. He didn't need an audience. He didn't need recognition. But what he had needed was to play. And now that he had, the silence inside him had finally broken. But as he walked away from the past, he had no idea someone else from that past was already looking for him. She had seen the clip, didn't even know how it reached her. Simeon's nephew forwarded it, said, "Didn't you used to teach with his mom?" And the rest unraveled from there. The piano, the silence, the one note that split the room in half. She knew that note, had heard it before, played shakily by a child in a dim church hall with more dust than windows. And now, decades later, it rang with the same ache. Her name was Miss Adele, 73, sharp as a cracked bell and just as loud when necessary. She taught music theory, gospel harmony, and the kind of discipline only black church women knew how to enforce without saying a word. She had been there the day his mother passed, had helped fold the choir robes, had packed the hymn books, and when he left town, disappearing in the silence and finance and shadows, she didn't blame him. Not once, but she never forgot. So when she saw that footage, that performance, she knew it wasn't just a return, it was a call. And she still had something of his. It had been tucked away in her attic, wrapped in one of the old choir shawls, a notebook worn, fragile, filled with handwritten chords, sketches of scales, and one page with a smudged message. "To my baby, when you're ready to play again." Signed in shaky cursive, Mama. She held it now as the taxi slowed outside his building. The concierge tried to stop her, but she moved like someone who had nothing to prove and everything to deliver. "He's not expecting visitors," the man said, nervous. She nodded. "He's not expecting me." And that made all the difference. The elevator ride was silent. She stood still, both hands on the book, as if guarding a heartbeat. When the door opened, he was standing in the whole-no suit, no mask, just sweatpants and an old t-shirt. And for the first time in 25 years, he looked 12 again. She didn't speak. She just stepped forward and placed the notebook in his hands. He stared at it, fingertips brushing over the aged paper like it might vanish. "How did you?" "I kept it," she said softly. "She gave it to me. Said not to mail it. Said, he'll come back when he's ready. But if he doesn't, you'll know when it's time to bring it to him." He didn't blink, didn't breathe, because suddenly, the silence in him had a shape. He opened the book, first page, a sketch of a piano, then, for bars of melody, messy, familiar. Then the line, in fading ink, "When you stop being afraid of your gift, the world will have to listen." His throat tightened. He looked at her. She nodded once, proud, fierce. "You played for the rich," she said. "Next time, play for yourself." And with that she left. The door closed behind her. He sat down slowly, notebook in his lap, the past in his hands. And in that moment, he knew this story wasn't finished. Not yet, because someone else was about to hear him play. Someone who had been waiting a very long time. The next time he was seen in public, it wasn't at a gala. It wasn't behind tinted glass or at the head of a boardroom. It was at a music hall. Not Carnegie, not Berlin, but a weathered jazz club in New Orleans. No sign, no cameras, just shadows and brass. He walked in alone, no assistant, no entourage, just a leather satchel under one arm and a quiet nod to the old man behind the bar. The regulars barely looked up. This wasn't the place for recognition. It was the place for reverence. The piano in the corner was missing 3 keys. The bench creaked like it remembered every soul who sat on it. But it was honest. No pretense. No polish. He asked for nothing. He just sat down. The bartender raised an eyebrow, The trumpet player paused mid-sip. Then it's not like before, not composed, not grand, but raw, improvised, built from ache and freedom and dust and pulse. It started with blues, bled into gospel, then something cinematic, like a movie with no title. The kind of melody that made you forget you had somewhere else to be. By the third minute, no one was speaking. By the sixth, no one was breathing. And by the eighth, phones began to lift, quietly, secretly, as if they knew something sacred was unfolding. And even their guilt couldn't stop them from recording it. He didn't care. He wasn't playing for them. He wasn't even playing for her. He was playing for the boy who used to sit in the back pew of the church, listening to his mother sing when the congregation stopped. For the version of himself who once believed music was soft. Now he knew. Music was still wrapped in silk. It didn't beg. It didn't ask. It just was. When he finished, he stood up without a word. But this time, he left something behind. A card, not with his name, just a logo. Subtle, elegant, sharp black lettering on matte white stock. Black Noise. No one knew what it meant yet, but 2 days later, the domain went live, and on the homepage, only one sentence appeared. Music isn't an escape, it's the entrance. There were no tour dates, no biography, no contact form, just a countdown. 73 days, and the world started watching. But back on the yacht, one woman was still stuck at the moment he stood up, and what she was about to do no one saw coming. She couldn't sleep. Not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the piano. Not the man, not the look on his face, just the piano, and the way it sounded when he touched it, like memory being carved into air. The comments hadn't stopped. Clips had gone viral. Not just the performance, but her reaction, the eye roll, the tone in her voice, the exact moment she said, "That's a 7-figure instrument, not a toy for anyone to just poke." That line had been turned into audio memes, parodies, even remixed over trap beats. She couldn't open her phone without seeing herself. But it wasn't the humiliation that haunted her. It was the way he didn't look at her, not with spite, not even with pity. Just through her, like she wasn't even part of the moment. And maybe that's what cut the deepest. Because for once, the world had turned away from her, not out of anger, out of disinterest. The man she mocked had disappeared into the shadows with elegance, and she was left exposed, flawed, forgettable. For someone like her, that was worse than hate. She tried to call her manager, no answer. Her PR team had sent a short statement, misunderstood tone. Appreciation for artistry, but no one cared. Because truth is, this wasn't about branding. This was about something you can't spin. The feeling of missing something eternal. Because you were too busy being loud. She replayed the video again. His hands, the pause before the first note, the stillness in his shoulders, the conviction in his silence. And then just for a second she saw something. She paused the clip, zoomed in. On the piano's side, next to the closed fall board, was a tiny symbol, a circle intersected by a diagonal slash. She'd seen it before, on a notebook her ex had once tried to pitch to AVC, a stealth startup, something called Black Noise. And suddenly, she sat up, because now it wasn't just guilt she felt, it was something sharper, curiosity and desperation. Because what if this man wasn't just a musician? What if she had laughed at the first public seed of something the world hadn't even named yet? And what if she missed her only chance to be part of it? She stood, paced, opened her laptop. She searched everything. Langston Black, Black Noise, pianist got viral. Nothing concrete, just speculation, reaction videos, and one countdown clock. 73 days. She stared at it, then did something no one expected her to do. She packed a bag. No stylist, no PR, no posts, just one flight. Detroit. She didn't know what she was going to say. She didn't even know if he'd see her. But somehow, she knew. If she didn't go now, she'd spend the rest of her life watching a story she was never allowed back into. The house was unassuming. Not grand, not guarded, just brick and quiet, with a small tree leaning tiredly in the yard. She stood on the sidewalk for a full minute before moving. One hand clutched her phone. The other clenched air. No makeup, no red dress. Just a sweater to sizes too big and jeans that hadn't seen the light of social media in years. She didn't know what she expected. Maybe an intercom, a gate, a warning sign. But there was only a door. So she knocked. No answer. She waited, then turned to leave when it creaked open. He stood there. No surprise in his eyes, no confusion. Just calm, as if he knew this moment would come. They stared at each other. The wind moved her hair, but neither of them blinked. Finally, she said softer than she'd spoken in years. "I shouldn't be here." He nodded once, but didn't close the door. She swallowed. I wanted to say something, even if you don't care, even if it's useless." He didn't speak, so she continued. "I didn't laugh because you weren't good. I laughed because I didn't understand what I was seeing. And people like me." Her voice cracked. "We don't handle confusion well. We try to kill it before it embarrasses us." Silence. But he didn't walk away. She took a step closer. "You didn't just play music that night. You shattered something. And all of us. And me most of all." He finally spoke. Just one sentence. "Why are you really here?" She faltered. "To say I'm sorry." "No," he said. Her breath caught. He stepped aside. Let her in. She walked past him, slow, unsure. Inside, the room was clean, minimal. One bookshelf. One framed photo of a woman smiling with tired eyes. And in the corner the piano. Not the yacht Steinway. This one was older, smaller, with a crack on the lid. He walked toward it, lifted the bench, and pulled something from underneath. A notebook, the same one Miss Adele had brought days before. He set it on the table, turned it around, and pointed to one page. She leaned in. It wasn't music. It was a sentence, handwritten in fading ink. "The world won't always clap, but play anyway." She looked up at him. Tears welled in her eyes. Not because of guilt, but because this felt like something she had never been invited into before. Not a brand, not a network, something real. And she asked, voice trembling, "Is it too late to learn how to listen?" He studied her for a moment, then said, "That depends. On what? On whether you're asking to be part of the noise, or the silence." And what she said next would decide whether their story ended here or began again. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat on the edge of the worn-out piano bench, fingertips hovering over wood scarred by years, memories, and calluses not her own. He remained standing, watching, waiting, and in that moment, she understood something no apology could buy her. She wasn't here to be forgiven. She was here to listen. She looked down at the keys, then back at him. "I don't know how to play," she said quietly, not even twinkle twinkle. He almost smiled, not with his mouth, with something quieter, somewhere between his breath and his eyes. "That's not what I asked," he said. She nodded. "I'm not here to make noise," she whispered. "Not this time." And with that, he walked past her and sat beside her. Not as a performer, not as a billionaire, just a man. He didn't touch the keys. He placed the notebook between them, opened it, pointed to a simple melody, just 5 notes. She followed it with her eyes. Simple, but not easy. He nodded toward the piano. She hesitated, then slowly, like touching memory, she played the first note. It was wrong, sharp, hesitant, unconfident. She looked at him, embarrassed, but he didn't flinch. "Try again," he said. So she did, and on the 3rd time, it rang true. It wasn't magic. It wasn't genius, but it was hers. And he played the second part. Their hands didn't touch, but their sound did. Somewhere in that small room, in a quiet Detroit neighborhood, 2 lives that had collided in shame began to weave something neither of them had language for. Something better than absolution. Something more fragile than forgiveness. A beginning. When the final notes settled into the air, she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. He stood. She didn't ask to stay, and he didn't offer, because what mattered had already been said without speaking. At the door, she turned back. One day, she said, "when you play for the world again." He looked at her. "Yes." She smiled, soft and real. "I'll be listening, not recording, not reacting, just listening." And for the first time, he smiled back. "Then that," he said, "will be the first real performance." She left. The door clicked behind her, and inside, Langston Black sat down at the piano and began writing again. Black Noise would launch weeks later, but the real sound, it started in that room, with 5 notes, and to people who finally heard each other.